It was a summer afternoon in June, and almost immediately after the scan we were took to a side room where Camille was still under a GA, and we were told there was a large growth in her brain and that it was serious. Camille was immediately blue lighted up to Addenbrooke's Hospital after diagnosis, where she was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. They scheduled her in for an operation the next day to take the pressure off her brain, which was successful. And then there was meetings with the surgeon, and we were told her tumour was inoperable. And I think the words that were spoken was, your little girl is very poorly. The biggest fear was a cancer that couldn't be treated. Camille was diagnosed with an ependymoma, which, although can be quite resistant to chemo, it can stabilise the tumour. And Camille underwent 16 months of chemo, and during that time she was getting infections every other week. She was very poorly. We nearly lost her to sepsis, to meningitis. It was 16 months of absolute hell. And then after 16 months, she got the sepsis, she got a really bad infection. They couldn't carry on with chemo. And so the only option we had at that point was neurosurgery. We actually sent her scans around the world and got a second opinion from Alderhay, who had a surgeon there who felt he could get it all out over, 2 or 3 operations. So that's the road we went down. And luckily, as a result of that, Camille met the criteria for proton therapy, which isn't available in the UK. So we had to fly over to Florida, and we lived there for about 4 months while she underwent daily general anaesthetics and underwent 33 rounds of proton therapy, which was the maximum that they would allow her to have. And we flew back, and thankfully, we flew back 13 years ago, and she's had 13 years of clear scans. Camille is at college. She's at a specialised college. She's doing a foundation course, which should lead her on to hopefully become independent and do some voluntary work. And we're really hopeful for her future. When we were told that there was a large mass in Camille's brain, it just changed our lives forever, and I'm not sure we really knew the impact at that moment, because nobody mentioned the cancer word, and there was part of me thinking, oh, that's fine, we'll get it removed. And then slowly the reality sunk in, and as the consultant kept talking, I can only describe it as feeling like an out-of-body experience, like that I was being recorded and this was some sort of game show. And the other way I've described it over the years is also like this feeling, and I think those feelings came later when we got more information, and it just felt very much like being buried alive. I can't. Even now, we're 15 years on, and I still can't adequately put into words that devastation, and our lives have never been the same since. So throughout Camille's treatment, we really didn't have that support, and it wasn't until post-treatment that Tom's Trust came along. And we had the support of Angela, one of the psychologists. It was across board as well. So Angela would speak to other therapists, she'd talk to speech and language therapy. So we felt that Camille was getting the whole breadth of support services outside of physical treatment that she could receive. So Tom's Trust and Brainbow at the time coordinated all of that for us, and it was incredible. So we saw what wasn't available, and then we suddenly entered a world where, wow, this is incredible, this is available to us.
I don't think anything can ever prepare you for the news you get when your child is diagnosed with such a serious illness. And I remember just breaking down after the doctor had left the room and just left Hayley and I to it. And for the rest of the day I was quite emotional, And then I woke up in the morning in what was old nurses' accommodation, like emergency overnight accommodation that they put me in at Addenbrooke's, and I cried again a lot, and then realised that actually what I needed to try and do was be as strong as possible for Hayley and Camille in the situation that we were in. And I don't know if I cried then in front of them again at all throughout the whole process. And it wasn't because I didn't want to. I think it was just that trying to be as resolute as possible and trying to be as positive as possible for them too. My mental health throughout the process, I didn't probably realise that there was an impact, if I'm honest. I think what I'm quite good at, and subsequently through work and things like that, I've done lots of psychometric tests and things. What I'm able to do is very much go into process, and my desire to be in a process is much higher when I get under high levels of stress. So actually going through the treatment cycle with Camille and trying to understand what the next step would be was quite comforting to me. So being process driven, seeing a process in front of me and there was steps to go forward was really, really important. I think what subsequently happens when she stops treatment and then has to try and step into a normal life is you realise you've probably bottled up lots and lots of emotions over many months and years. And it doesn't come out very often, but it can. And it can expose itself in just this, I'll call it an explosion of emotions, but it can be quite a powerful experience when it does happen. So Tom's Trust is an incredibly important service for us and for many other families probably in the same situation as us. It's really important that you're not judged for either being too low, too emotional, too guarded, actually, and having the support of a team like Tom's Trust have formed at Addenbrooke's and other places is incredibly important for us, just to have that space to be able to talk openly.
I was 3 years old when Camille was diagnosed. Well, at first it was mostly my grandparents taking care of me, and a lot of my extended family, aunts and uncles, really stepped up. But I remember one day Camille was completely fine. Then the next she wasn't eating much at all, causing a lot of stress. We thought it was celiac disease, my parents did. And then the next day everything had completely changed. It was all of a sudden she'd been diagnosed with a brain tumour and everything kind of flipped on its head. Mum got very, very depressed very quickly, and Dad had to tackle both Mum and Camille all at the same time. So I was put in this kind of limbo where I was kind of in between family all the time, not really understanding why or what was going on. I never really remember how it was explained to me. I just remember not ever really understanding. I think the first time I properly understood was when I went to visit Camille in hospital after one of her first major operations, and all of a sudden she had no hair and was covered in wires, and that's when I first realised that something was really wrong, but I never properly understood what was happening. I think siblings often feel forgotten, even if they haven't necessarily been, and it's hard to feel prioritised or wanted in the household and all that kind of things when all of this is going on. So to have just someone to speak to, just you alone, is so important, to have that undivided attention just for a little part of your life.